Bonjour. In this grammar video, we will go over les verbes suivis d'un infinitif, verbs followed by an infinitive. The basic information about this can be found on a YouTube video, I Learn French, Verbs with Infinitives. However, the video does not include one last bit of information that we will go over here. Sometimes the verb is followed directly by an infinitive, but sometimes there is a preposition in between. Sometimes this preposition is a, sometimes this preposition is de, sometimes there is a third preposition, but today we are only going to look at the prepositions a and de. So an example of a verb followed immediately by an infinitive is Paul aime nager. Paul likes to swim. One with a is Paul continue à nager. Paul continues to swim. And one with de, Paul essaie de nager. Paul tries to swim. When you use a and when you use de is completely arbitrary, and it is necessary to memorize. There is a list in the book, but practice will help you remember this distinction. The sum of the verbs followed immediately by an infinitive are aller, aimer, devoir, préférer, and pouvoir. Some examples where the infinitive directly follows the verb are Daniel va visiter le musée. Daniel aime visiter le musée. Daniel is going to visit the museum. Daniel likes to visit the museum. Here we have the infinitive. It is placed directly after the conjugated verb. Va visiter, aime visiter. But the same thing works in the negative as well. Danielle ne doit pas visiter le musée. She doesn't have to visit the museum. Here the negation ne pas surrounds the first verb. Ne doit pas, and the infinitive visiter comes immediately after. And this is the same for all of them. Daniel ne doit pas visiter, Daniel n'aime pas visiter, and so on. It also works with questions. Est-ce que Daniel préfère visiter le musée? Does Daniel prefer to visit the museum? Here we have the first verb, préfère, conjugated, and the infinitive immediately after. And the same thing works in the passé composé. Daniel a pu visiter le musée. Daniel was able to visit the museum. Here we have the passé composé, the two parts of it, a pu, and those two parts are immediately followed by the infinitive. A pu visiter. There is a similar structure with the verbs that are followed by a before the infinitive. Paul réussit à conjuguer. Paul continue à conjuguer. Here we have the a in between the conjugated verb and the infinitive. Réussit à conjuguer, continue à conjuguer. But again, the same thing works in the negative. Paul n'apprend pas à conjuguer. Paul is not learning to conjugate. The ne and the pas surround the main verb. N'apprend pas, then you have the preposition, and then you have the infinitive. Paul n'apprend pas à conjuguer. Similarly with the question, est-ce que Paul hésite à conjuguer? Does Paul hesitate to conjugate? Here we have est-ce que Paul hésite, the main verb, followed by the preposition and followed again by the infinitive. Paul hésite à conjuguer. Est-ce que Paul hésite à conjuguer? And the same thing in the passé composé. Paul a commencé à conjuguer. Paul began to conjugate. Here we have the full form of the passé composé, both parts. Paul a commencé, and then the preposition a, and then the infinitive. A couple of notes. With commencer, you can sometimes have a, and you can sometimes have par. The two, however, do not mean the same thing. Paul commence à conjuguer means Paul begins to conjugate. He wasn't conjugating before, but he's conjugating now. Paul commence à conjuguer. With par, Paul commence par conjuguer. Paul begins by conjugating. It is the first step in a sequence of events. There is a similar format with verbs that take de as their preposition. Nous essayons de conjuguer. Nous choisissons de conjuguer. We try to conjugate. We choose to conjugate. Here we have the de immediately between them. Essayons, preposition, de, infinitive, conjuguer. Choisissons, conjugated verb, de, preposition, conjuguer, infinitive. And again, it is the same order in the negative. Nous ne refusons pas de conjuguer. We do not refuse to conjugate. We have the full negation, ne pas, surrounding the main verb, ne refusons pas. Then we have the preposition de, and then we have the infinitive, conjuguer. And it is the same thing in questions 2. Est-ce que nous oublions de conjuguer? Do we forget to conjugate? Nous oublions is the conjugated verb de preposition conjugué infinitif. Est-ce que nous oublions de conjuguer? And similarly, we have the same order in the passé composé. Nous n'avons pas décidé de conjuguer. We did not decide to conjugate. Here we have avons décidé, the passé composé, preceding the preposition de, preceding the infinitive conjugué. We have here also the negation of the passé composé, n'avons pas, followed by the past participle. Then we have the preposition, then the infinitive. So this is a complicated example, but it does follow the logic of the passé composé and the verbs that are followed by a preposition and an infinitive. Nous n'avons pas décidé de conjuguer. We did not decide to conjugate. Similarly, with commencer, with finir, you can have finir de and finir par. Paul finit de conjuguer. Paul finishes conjugating. He finishes to conjugate. Similarly, with commencer, with finir, you can have de or par. Paul finit de conjuguer. Paul finishes conjugating. Paul finishes to conjugate. This means that he was conjugating in the past, and at the present moment, he is finishing, he is stopping, he is ending. Paul finit par conjuguer means that conjugating is the last step in a sequence of events. So commence par is the first step in a sequence of events. Finir par is the last event in a sequence of events. Remember that the phrase venir de a verb does not mean to come from doing that verb, but it is the recent past. Paul vient de conjuguer. Paul has just conjugated. It is an event that has just happened in the past and has immediately ended. Paul vient de conjuguer. Paul has just conjugated. Je viens d'expliquer la grammaire. I have just finished explaining la grammaire.